Hey everybody, welcome back to Anatomy and Physiology with Mr. Chang. Today we're going to be talking about epithelial cells and epithelial tissue. Okay, so what is the actual function of epithelial tissue? So it helps physical protection, control permeability. So what that permeability means, it controls what goes in and out. Okay, provide sensation and produce specialized secretions. Okay, so I think the epithelial tissue that you're most well known with is your skin. Okay, so your skin is the main form of epithelial tissue. So if you think about it, okay, your skin helps to physically protect you. It's the first barrier of infection. It controls permeability. Okay, so your skin actually breathes. So things go in and out. For example, if you've seen that episode of Grey's Anatomy, I think where the one guy was encased in concrete, so his skin couldn't breathe and couldn't excrete excess waste. So what happened was he was slowly dying and he slowly poisoned himself because all of the toxins would go back into his body and not excreted out. Okay. And then, so you provide sensation, touch, right? So if you feel anything on your skin that is touching you, you feel it. So that's what sensation is. So where are they? Okay. Where are epithelial tissue? Body surfaces, lining of the internal organs, and glands. Okay. So what are the components of epithelial tissue? Okay, so epithelia. So this is the covering of the body. Okay, so it covers most exposed surfaces. Exposed means that's to the outside. Okay, often contains gland cells, which secrete substances such as hormones, and it's found throughout other types of tissue. Second are glands that derive from epithelia, but they could contain more secretory cells. Okay, so two types. Exocrine glands secrete on external areas of body. Ex means outside. Endocrine, okay, secretes hormones into the body. So endocrine, En like enter means inside. Ex like exit means outside. Okay. Now, if you look at this picture, you see all the circled areas in red. These are showing the connections between the epithelia. Okay, so these connections are pretty important. So they allow the cells to form complete coverings or linings. So it's like when you're stitching. Let's say you have different layers of fabric, or let's say you're making a quilt. So you have all these separate little boxes, then you have to stitch them together. Okay, so then that's essentially the connections that epithelial cells make. Okay, they have the ability to replace damaged cells, and they lack blood vessels, but the lowest layers remain attached to tissues near blood vessels. So just think about your skin, epithelial cells, right? So your skin is always getting replaced. So if you rub your skin and your skin's a little ashy, right? Those are dead skin cells, and they're constantly being replaced. Okay. Also, let's say if you're on your skin, if you scratch yourself a little bit, like on the layer of your skin, you don't breathe. You don't bleed. But if you scratch harder, okay, to the lower layer, that's when you start bleeding. Please don't try that. So if you look at this picture of the little mouse, okay, this picture shows you areas where epithelial tissue is located. So the nasal passages, the esophagus, the lungs, the intestines, the urinary system, and the kidneys. Okay, so let's talk about some defining, distinguishing characteristics of epithelial cells and epithelial tissue. So they're tightly packed. Okay, so if you look, they're tightly packed. Okay, they lack blood vessels. Okay, so you don't see any red in these pictures. Okay, they have a free surface, a basement membrane, and they readily divide. So we'll talk about what free surface and basement membrane mean in a second. So just look at these pictures. Okay, tightly packed. Okay, it looks like they're all squished together. They lack blood vessels, so you don't see any red lines. Okay, that connect these cells to blood vessels. Okay, and last part, you can't really see it, but they're constantly being replaced. They readily divide. Okay, So now, how do you identify epithelial tissue? So one side is always exposed, okay, to the outside. This is called the free surface, the external surface. Okay, the non-free surface is attached to the underlying connective tissue. So essentially, the matrix. It's called the basement membrane. Okay, and then for epithelial tissue, the cells are so tightly packed that they have very little matrix. It's almost made entirely of the cell. Okay, and then lastly, there's very few blood vessels found in epithelial tissue. So what we're going to look at next is we're going to try to identify which of the pictures is epithelial tissue. Okay, I'll give you guys a second. Think about what we said previous. Okay, in the previous slide here, one side is exposed. There's a non-free surface. The cells are tightly packed together, and there are very few blood vessels. So if you look at these pictures, one question might be, how do you actually identify individual cells? So for example, if you look at this picture here, okay, let's get the blue. If you see these little dots, there's little dots everywhere. Okay, the little dots here, here, okay. See the little dots here, these little lines. Okay, those are the nuclei of the cells. Okay, so the more dots there are, that means the more tightly packed together these cells are. Okay. So if you look, which ones do you think are mostly tightly packed together? I would probably think this one. Okay. And maybe this one. Okay. So if you look at this picture here, you can see that these cells are in circular configuration. Okay. If you look at this picture, you can see that there are not as many nuclei, so the cells aren't packed tightly together. Okay. If you see this one, okay, you see all of this extracellular matrix here. Okay, all this blue. What that means is there's a lot of space between these cells. And then this picture here, you can see all the nuclei here. But then what do you also see? Up here, different types of tissue and blood vessels. Okay, so take a guess. Okay, that is the epithelial tissue. Now, why? Cells are packed tightly together. Okay, you see there's two surfaces. There's an outside surface, okay, and there's an inside surface. Okay, again, the surface is called the free surface and the basement membrane layer. So let's look at this. Like we said before, components of epithelial tissue. We're going to take a second to try to identify the basement membrane, and the free surface. Okay, so which is which? Basement membrane outside, free surface here. Okay, so if we go back to the picture, basement membrane outside here, free surface here. Okay. Again, how to classify epithelial tissue. Okay, if you look, number of layers. Okay, so if you look at this picture, we have a free surface. Okay, basement membrane. So this is one single layer. It looks like two layers, but it's one single layer. One single layer here and one layer here. Because what you can see is there's a free surface here as well as free surface out here. Okay. Here, if you look, the cells again are very tightly packed together. Okay, so here is to the outside, so that's why this is called the free surface. Here, this is the inside of the epithelial tissue towards the inside of the body. That's why this is called the basement membrane. Okay. So the second type of epithelial tissue is called stratified. So you just look, you can see there's layers. Okay. The third type, pseudostratified. So appears layered because nuclei are on different levels, but they're not truly layered. Okay, so if you look here, there's a basement membrane, there's the free surface. Okay, so now there's only one layer between the basement membrane and the free surface. Okay, but you have to look closely. The cells are so tightly packed together that the nuclei overlap. So this is called pseudostratified. Pseudo means fake. So it looks like it's stratified, but it's not. Okay. The second way you can classify epithelial tissue, okay, is by the shape. There's squamous, there's cuboidal, there's columnar, and there's transitional. Okay, I think it's pretty easy to tell the difference between these. Okay. Third way to classify epithelial tissue is the presence or absence of cilia. So we've got to remember cilia are little hair-like projections that come out of cells. Hopefully you remember it from freshman biology. So if you look here, this one has cilia, this one doesn't. Okay. How can you see? See these little hairs? That indicates the presence of cilia. Okay. And the third way to classify epithelial tissue, well, the fourth way, if they are keratinized or not. So now, what does keratinized mean? Okay, keratinized cells are dead at the surface. Okay, how can you tell? They don't have nuclei. So if you think about your skin, your outside skin, the outer layer of your skin is all keratinized cells. Okay, because they're dead. They're dead skin cells. And then underneath that layer are living cells. So if you look at these two pictures, here you see the outer layer. There are no nuclei, which is represented by the blue. Here, you can see that even on the outer layer, there's nuclei, so all the cells are living. So now, using the information on the following slides, I would like you to fill in your flowchart that is in your epithelial tissue notes. Okay, you're going to add simple sketches of the cells. You're going to describe their characteristics, and you are going to list locations. That's it for today.